The sleek black Tesla made a strange clicking sound before the dashboard lit up like a Christmas tree. Red warning lights flashed everywhere as the car slowly rolled to a stop on the cracked asphalt of Grove Street. Daniel Rivera sat behind the wheel, staring at the error messages in disbelief. His $3 billion empire could buy him anything in the world, but right now none of that mattered. He was stuck. Daniel pulled out his phone. Dead battery, of course. He'd been rushing between meetings all day and forgot to charge it. His driver was supposed to pick him up, but Daniel had insisted on driving himself to the airport for once. Now he was regretting that decision. He looked around nervously. This wasn't his usual neighborhood. Grove Street was a world away from his glass towers and gated communities. Boarded-up windows stared back at him from old buildings. Graffiti covered most walls. A few people walked by, but they seemed to look right through him and his expensive car. Daniel had taken a wrong turn trying to avoid traffic. GPS had led him here before dying along with his phone. He knew he was somewhere in East Oakland, but beyond that he was lost. The afternoon sun beat down on the car, and without air conditioning it was getting hot fast. A group of teenagers walked past, talking loudly. Daniel quickly locked his doors. He'd heard stories about this area. Crime rates, poverty, things he'd only seen in news reports from his penthouse office. Being here in person felt different. Scary even. 20 minutes passed. No one stopped to help. A few cars drove by, but they kept going. Daniel loosened his tie and rolled down the windows slightly. The heat was becoming unbearable. He needed to do something, but what? Walk around looking for help? That seemed dangerous. Stay in the car? That wasn't working either. That's when he noticed the kid. A young black teenager was sitting on some concrete steps across the street watching him. The boy looked to be about 17, maybe 18. He wore a faded red hoodie despite the heat, and his jeans had holes in them. Not the designer kind that cost hundreds of dollars, but real wear and tear holes. The teenager had been observing the situation for a while. Daniel could feel those eyes studying his car, studying him. It made Daniel even more nervous. He gripped the door handle, ready to lock up completely if the kid came closer. But instead of approaching, the teenager just sat there, waiting, watching, like he was trying to figure something out. Finally, the boy stood up and walked over slowly, his hands visible at his sides. Daniel's heart started beating faster. This was it. This was how rich guys got robbed in bad neighborhoods. All those warnings from his security team flashed through his mind. The teenager stopped about 10 feet from the car and called out, "Hey man, you okay? Your car's been smoking for like half an hour." Daniel cracked the window slightly. "It just broke down. I'm waiting for help." His voice sounded tighter than he intended. "Phone dead?" the boy asked. Daniel nodded reluctantly. "Yeah, that happens. These Teslas have electrical problems sometimes. Mind if I take a look? I know a bit about cars." Every instinct told Daniel to say no. Don't trust strangers. Don't let anyone near your expensive things. Don't engage with people in neighborhoods like this. But the heat was getting worse and no help was coming. What choice did he have? "I guess," Daniel said, still keeping the windows mostly closed. The teenager approached the front of the car and immediately spotted the problem. "See that steam? It's not just overheating. Something's wrong with the cooling system. If you keep sitting here with the engine running, you're going to fry the whole battery pack." Daniel had no idea what that meant, but it sounded expensive. "Very expensive. You should turn it off," the boy continued. "The battery's getting too hot." "But then I won't be able to start it again," Daniel protested. "Trust me, if you don't turn it off now, you definitely won't be able to start it again. That battery pack costs more than most people make in a year." Reluctantly, Daniel shut off the engine. The silence felt heavy. Now he was really stuck. The teenager walked around the car slowly, looking at different parts. He seemed to know what he was doing, which surprised Daniel. Where would a kid from this neighborhood learn about Teslas? "What's your name?" Daniel asked through the window. "Tyler," the boy replied. "Tyler Washington." "And you, Daniel?" "Daniel Rivera." Tyler nodded and continued his inspection. After a few minutes, he came back to the driver's side. "Good news and bad news," Tyler said. "Good news is it's fixable. Bad news is you need a new coolant sensor and some other parts. The cooling system's been acting up for a while, probably. You been getting any warning messages?" Daniel thought back. There had been some yellow lights on the dashboard over the past few weeks, but he'd ignored them. He had people to handle car problems. Except those people weren't here now. Maybe. Daniel admitted. Tyler shook his head with a slight smile. Rich folks always ignore the warnings until something breaks completely. No offense. There was something about the way Tyler said it that wasn't mean or judgmental. Just matter of fact. Like he'd seen this before. Can you fix it? Daniel asked. Probably. Gonna need some parts, though. There's a junkyard about 6 blocks from here. They might have what we need. We're close enough. A junkyard? Daniel couldn't hide his doubt. I know it sounds crazy, but these electric cars use a lot of the same basic parts as regular cars. Sensors, pumps, wiring. Sometimes junkyard parts work better than the fancy new ones anyway. Daniel stared at this teenager who was calmly discussing car repairs like he was a professional mechanic. Nothing about this situation made sense. He was a billionaire getting car advice from a homeless-looking kid in a rough neighborhood. But what other options did he have? How do you know all this? Daniel asked. Tyler's expression changed slightly. Something sadder passed across his face. My grandfather taught me. He used to own a shop before. Tyler trailed off, then shrugged. Before things changed. I've been fixing cars since I was 12. Daniel looked at Tyler more carefully. Despite the worn clothes and the tough neighborhood, there was something steady about this kid. Something trustworthy. It went against everything Daniel had been taught about staying safe, but his gut was telling him to trust Tyler. How much would this cost? Daniel asked. Parts might run you $40-50. Labor? Tyler grinned. Buy me lunch and we're even. Daniel couldn't believe what he was hearing. His last car repair bill had been $800 for an oil change at the dealership. This kid was offering to fix a complex electrical problem for the price of a sandwich. You'd really help me? Daniel asked, still not quite believing it. Tyler looked directly at him through the window. Man, if I was stuck somewhere, I'd hope somebody would help me out. Besides, you look like you've never been in a situation like this before. Everybody needs help sometimes. And just like that, Daniel realized this 17-year-old kid was about to teach him something his billions never could. Daniel watched nervously as Tyler disappeared around the corner, heading toward the junkyard. The billionaire sat in his dead car, sweating in his expensive suit, wondering if he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life. What if the kid never came back? What if this was all some elaborate setup? But 30 minutes later, Tyler returned, carrying a small cardboard box and wearing a satisfied grin. Found everything we need, he announced, setting the box on the hood. Even got lucky with the coolant sensor. This one's barely used. Daniel stepped out of the car for the first time since breaking down. His legs felt stiff and the heat hit him immediately. Tyler was already popping the hood, moving with the confidence of someone who'd done this 100 times before. First thing, Tyler said, pulling on a pair of work gloves that had seen better days. We need to drain the coolant. Can't work on the system while it's full. You might want to step back a bit. This stuff can splash. Daniel moved away, feeling useless. In his world, when something broke, you called someone to fix it. You didn't get your hands dirty. You definitely didn't crawl under cars in expensive suits. Tyler disappeared under the hood and Daniel could hear him working. Metal on metal. The sound of tools against engine parts. It was strangely calming, like listening to someone who really knew what they were doing. So what do you do? Tyler's voice came from under the hood. For work, I mean. You dress like you work in one of those big office buildings downtown. Daniel hesitated. How do you tell someone you're worth $3 billion when they're fixing your car for the price of lunch? I'm in tech, he said finally. Software development. Cool, like apps and stuff? Something like that. Daniel wiped sweat from his forehead. What about you? Are you in school? Tyler's hands paused for a moment. Trying to be. It's complicated. There was something in Tyler's tone that made Daniel curious, but he didn't push. Instead, he watched as Tyler worked with tools that looked like they'd been salvaged from multiple sources. A wrench with a cracked handle, pliers held together with electrical tape. Nothing matched, but everything worked. There we go, Tyler said, sliding out from under the hood. His hands and forearms were covered in coolant and grime. Sensors out. Now the fun part. Tyler picked up what looked like a small electronic device from his box of parts. This is the new sensor. Well, new to your car anyway. It's from a 2019 Model S, but the part numbers match. Should work perfectly. Daniel watched in amazement as Tyler installed the sensor with the precision of a surgeon. The teenager's hands moved confidently, knowing exactly which wire went where, which connection needed to be tight, which parts needed to be handled carefully. How did you learn all this? Daniel asked. Tyler smiled while he worked. My grandfather, like I said. He started teaching me when I was little. Said every man should know how to fix things with his own hands. Technology changes, he used to say, but the basics stay the same. He sounds like a smart man. The smartest. Tyler's voice got quieter. He could fix anything. Cars, motorcycles, even those fancy European sports cars that cost more than houses. People used to drive from all over the state to bring him their impossible problems. Daniel could hear the pride in Tyler's voice, but also something else. Loss, maybe. What happened to his shop? Daniel asked gently. Tyler was quiet for a long moment, focused intently on a stubborn bolt. Rent kept going up. Neighborhoods started changing. All the old customers moved away or started going to those chain repair places. He held on as long as he could, but Tyler shrugged. Sometimes holding on isn't enough. Daniel felt an uncomfortable twist in his stomach. He'd never thought about what happened to small businesses when neighborhoods changed, when rents increased, when people like him moved in and changed everything. That must have been hard, Daniel said. Yeah, it was, especially for him. That shop was his whole life. 43 years in the same location. Tyler tightened the last connection and looked up. But he taught me everything he knew. Said skills like this never go out of style. People always gonna need things fixed. Tyler moved to the next part of the repair, replacing what he called the coolant pump. Daniel found himself genuinely interested in the process. In his world, everything was digital. Code and algorithms and data streams. This was different. Physical. Real. You could see the problem and fix it with your hands. Why electrical engineering in cars? Daniel asked. I mean, why not just be a regular mechanic? Tyler laughed. Man, there's no such thing as a regular mechanic anymore. Everything's computerized now. Even the old muscle cars from the 70s have some kind of electronic system. If you can't work with both the mechanical and electrical sides, you're going to be left behind. That made sense to Daniel. Technology was everywhere now, even in places you wouldn't expect. Plus, Tyler continued, electric vehicles are the future. Everybody's switching over. Gas engines are going to be like horse carriages pretty soon. Interesting museum pieces, but not what people actually use. Daniel was impressed. This kid understood technology trends better than some of his own employees. Tyler filled the cooling system with fresh coolant, then started the car. The dashboard came to life with its usual array of lights, but this time they were mostly green. The error messages were gone. Let's let it run for a few minutes, Tyler said, wiping his hands on an old rag. Make sure everything's working properly. Sometimes these systems need a minute to reset themselves. They stood together watching the engine bay, listening to the quiet hum of the electric motor. Daniel realized this was the longest he'd gone without checking email or taking a phone call in months. Usually every minute was scheduled, every second accounted for. But here, waiting for a car to reset itself, time felt different. Can I ask you something? Daniel said. Sure. You mentioned school is complicated. What's going on? Tyler was quiet for a moment, watching the temperature gauge on the dashboard. I aged out of foster care 6 months ago. Been staying wherever I can since then. Hard to stay in school when you don't have a permanent address. Daniel felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. You're homeless? Temporarily between housing situations, Tyler said with a wry smile. Sounds better than homeless, but you're so... Daniel struggled for words. You're clearly intelligent. You know more about cars than most professional mechanics. How is the system failing you this badly? Tyler looked at him with an expression Daniel couldn't quite read. Man, the system isn't failing me. The system is working exactly like it's designed to work. Some people get safety nets. Some people get opportunities. Some people get second chances. And some people get to figure it out on their own. There was no bitterness in Tyler's voice. No anger. Just a matter-of-fact acceptance that made Daniel feel even worse. The car beeped softly. Tyler checked the dashboard and nodded approvingly. We're good. Temperature's normal, pressure's stable, no error codes. You should be able to make it wherever you need to. Go. Daniel looked at this 17-year-old kid who'd just solved his problem with $40 worth of junkyard parts and more skill than Daniel possessed in any practical area of life. Tyler was homeless, struggling to stay in school, and had still stopped to help a complete stranger. Tyler, Daniel said, I need to ask you something important. Daniel insisted on buying Tyler dinner, but his choice of restaurant immediately felt wrong. The steakhouse was one of those places where a single meal cost more than most people spent on groceries in a week. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, and every waiter wore a crisp white shirt that probably cost more than Tyler's entire outfit. Tyler looked around uncomfortably as they were seated at a corner table. The host had given them both strange looks, probably wondering why a man in an expensive suit was dining with a teenager in worn clothes, who still had traces of car grease under his fingernails. "This place is fancy," Tyler said quietly, looking at the leather-bound menu with no prices listed. "Order whatever you want," Daniel said, though he was starting to realize how out of place this setting was. "I owe you way more than dinner for what you did today." Tyler ordered a simple burger and fries. Daniel got the salmon mostly because it was familiar. As they waited for their food, Daniel found himself studying this kid who'd completely changed his day. "So tell me about school," Daniel said. "What subjects do you like?" "Math and science mostly. Physics is cool because it explains how everything works, like why your car's cooling system failed or how electric motors convert energy." Tyler's eyes lit up as he talked. "I'm good at it too. Had a 3.8 GPA before things got complicated." "That's impressive. What do you want to do after high school?" Tyler laughed, but not in a happy way. "Man, I'm just trying to finish high school. College feels like something that happens to other people." "What do you mean?" "You need money for college. You need a permanent address. You need someone to co-sign loans. You need all kinds of things I don't have." Tyler shrugged. "Community college might be possible eventually, but even that's expensive when you're paying for food and shelter and everything else." Daniel felt uncomfortable. In his world, college was just something that happened automatically. You graduated high school, your parents wrote checks, and you went to the best school that accepted you. The idea that someone as smart as Tyler might not go to college because of money felt wrong. "There are scholarships," Daniel said. "Financial aid programs. Sure, for kids with permanent addresses and adults who can help them navigate the system. Foster kids who age out don't usually have someone helping them fill out college applications." Tyler's voice wasn't bitter, just realistic. "Besides, I need to work. Can't survive without income even with financial aid." Their food arrived and they ate in silence for a few minutes. Daniel found himself thinking about his own path to success. Yale for undergraduate, Stanford for his MBA. His parents had paid for everything. He'd graduated debt-free and immediately got a job at a tech startup, which led to founding his own company. "Can I ask you something?" Daniel said finally. "Do you think anyone can be successful if they work hard enough?" Tyler looked up from his burger. "You really want to know what I think?" "Yes. I think that's something people with money tell themselves so they can sleep at night." Daniel felt defensive. "I worked hard for everything I have. I put in 18-hour days building my company. I risked everything." "I'm not saying you didn't work hard," Tyler said calmly, "but you had a foundation to build on. You could afford to take risks because you had backup plans. If your company failed, you weren't going to end up sleeping on the street." "That's not true. I put everything on the line." Tyler set down his burger and looked directly at Daniel. "Where did you go to college?" "Yale, then Stanford for business school." "Who paid for that?" Daniel hesitated. "My parents helped." "So you graduated without debt?" "Well, yes, but where did you live while you were starting your company?" "I moved back home for a few months to save money." "So you had family support. A safety net." Tyler's voice remained patient, like he was explaining something to a child. "What happens if I fail? If I can't find work or get sick or make a mistake? Who catches me?" Daniel didn't have an answer for that. Tyler continued, "I'm not trying to take anything away from your success. You worked hard, you made smart decisions, you built something amazing. But you started from a place I've never been. You had opportunities I've never had. That doesn't make you a bad person, but pretending we all start from the same place, that's just not true." The words hit Daniel harder than he expected. He'd always believed his success was purely the result of his own effort. The idea that circumstances beyond his control had played a role felt like someone was diminishing his achievements. "So what are you saying? That success is just luck?" "I'm saying it's both hard work and luck. Effort and opportunity. Talent and timing." Tyler took a sip of his water. "You can work as hard as you want, but if you're working 3 part-time jobs just to survive, you don't have time to go to school or start a company or take unpaid internships that lead to better jobs." Daniel wanted to argue, but he found himself thinking about his own employees. The ones from wealthy families always seemed to advance faster. They could afford to take lower-paying positions at prestigious companies. They had connections through their families. They didn't carry student debt that limited their options. I never thought about it that way, Daniel admitted quietly. Most people don't have to think about it. That's part of the privilege. The word privilege made Daniel flinch. He'd heard it before, usually in contexts that made him defensive. But sitting across from Tyler, seeing the intelligence and potential being wasted because of circumstances beyond the kid's control, the word felt different. What would you do? Daniel asked. If money wasn't an issue. If you could do anything. Tyler's face changed completely. The guarded expression disappeared, replaced by genuine excitement. I'd study electrical engineering. Specifically, I'd want to work on making electric vehicles more efficient and affordable. Right now, they're still luxury items for rich people. But imagine if we could make them cheap enough that someone working minimum wage could afford one. That would change everything. How so? Transportation is one of the biggest barriers to economic mobility. If you can't reliably get to work, you can't keep a job. If you can't keep a job, you can't improve your situation. Cheap, reliable electric cars could help millions of people break out of poverty cycles. Daniel stared at Tyler in amazement. This homeless teenager was thinking about problems on a scale that most of Daniel's highly paid engineers never considered. Tyler wasn't just smart. He was thinking about how to use technology to help people like himself. You've really thought this through, Daniel said. I've had a lot of time to think about it. When you're living day to day, you see problems that people with comfortable lives never notice. They finished dinner mostly in silence. Daniel paid the check, leaving a tip larger than Tyler's meal cost. As they walked back to the car, Daniel's mind was racing. Everything Tyler had said challenged fundamental beliefs Daniel had held about success, fairness, and opportunity. It wasn't comfortable to realize that his own achievements, while earned through hard work, had been built on advantages that others never received. But more than that, Daniel was thinking about Tyler's dream of making electric vehicles accessible to everyone. It was brilliant. It was socially conscious. And it was the kind of thinking that could change the world. As they reached the Tesla, now running perfectly thanks to Tyler's skills, Daniel made a decision that would change both their lives. Tyler, he said, I have a proposition for you, but I need you to hear me out completely before you say no. Tyler looked suspicious. What kind of proposition? The kind that could change everything for both of us. The next morning, Daniel found himself in a place he'd never been before, the Oakland Public Library's main branch. He'd spent most of the night thinking about Tyler and their conversation at dinner. Something about that kid had gotten under his skin in a way nothing had for years. He spotted Tyler at a computer terminal in the back corner, hunched over the keyboard with intense concentration. The teenager was wearing the same clothes from yesterday, and Daniel realized Tyler probably didn't have many other options. Daniel approached quietly, not wanting to startle him. On the screen was an online physics course. Tyler was working through complex equations about electrical resistance and power conversion. The level of math involved looked like college-level material, maybe even graduate level. Advanced stuff, Daniel said softly. Tyler looked up, surprised. Daniel, what are you doing here? Looking for you, actually. The librarian at the front desk said you come here most days. Tyler saved his work and closed the browser window. It's free internet and air conditioning. Plus, they have online courses through the community college system. I can keep up with my education even without being officially enrolled. Daniel sat down in the chair next to Tyler's computer. That's actually why I wanted to talk to you. About your education. Tyler's expression became guarded. Look, if you're thinking about offering me charity or something, I appreciate it, but I'm not looking for handouts. It's not charity. It's a job offer. A job offer? Daniel took a deep breath. He'd been rehearsing this conversation all morning, but now that he was here, it felt more important than any business deal he'd ever made. My company has an automotive division. We're working on next-generation electric vehicle technology, battery efficiency, charging systems, cost reduction methods, the kind of stuff you were talking about last night. Tyler listened but didn't say anything. I want to offer you an apprenticeship. Real work, real pay, and we'll cover your education costs. High school completion first, then college if you want it. Engineering degree, full ride. Tyler stared at him for a long moment. Why? Because you're brilliant. Because you see problems other people miss. Because you fixed my car with junkyard parts and more skill than engineers with decades of experience. And because you feel guilty about being rich while I'm homeless? The bluntness of the question caught Daniel off guard, but he appreciated Tyler's directness. Maybe that's part of it. But mostly because I think you could help us build something important, something that could actually change people's lives. Tyler leaned back in his chair. What's the catch? No catch. Well, one condition. You'd have to be willing to help us develop programs for other kids in similar situations. Turn this into something bigger than just helping one person. You want me to be your token poor kid? Your feel-good story for the company website? Daniel shook his head. I want you to help us understand problems we've been blind to. I want you to help us build technology that actually serves people who need it, not just people who can afford it. Tyler was quiet for several minutes, staring at the blank computer screen. Daniel could practically see the wheels turning in the kid's head. I've been disappointed before, Tyler said finally. People make promises they don't keep. Especially to kids like me. I understand. But this isn't a promise. It's an offer with a contract. Legal documents. Everything in writing. Why should I trust you? Daniel thought about that question. Because I need this as much as you do. Yesterday you showed me how disconnected I've become from the real world. I've been so focused on building wealth that I forgot why technology matters. You reminded me. Tyler looked directly at Daniel. You're worth billions of dollars. You could hire any engineer you want. You don't need some homeless kid with a high school education. You're wrong about that. I can hire people with impressive degrees and years of experience. But I can't hire perspective. I can't hire the ability to see solutions that come from actually living with problems. Daniel leaned forward. Every engineer I employ comes from the same background I do. Middle class or wealthy families. Good schools. Safety nets. None of them understand what it's like to fix a car with salvaged parts because you can't afford new ones. None of them think about making technology accessible to people who are struggling. Tyler absorbed this silently. Plus, Daniel continued, you already know more about practical automotive engineering than half my current team. That's not an exaggeration. What you did yesterday would have taken my engineers weeks to figure out, and they would have used 10 times as many parts to do it. What exactly would this apprenticeship involve? You'd work directly with our engineering team on real projects. Start with basic tasks while you learn our systems, then gradually take on more responsibility. We'd pay you a real salary, not internship wages. Enough to get your own apartment, buy clothes, have some stability. Tyler's eyes showed interest for the first time. And school? We have partnerships with several universities. You could complete your high school requirements through our corporate education program, then transition directly into an engineering degree, all costs covered, and you'd keep working and earning while you study. What's my commitment? How long would I have to work for you? Daniel smiled. That's the thing. There's no long-term commitment required from you. Get your education, gain experience, and then do whatever you think is best. If you want to start your own company, I'll help you. If you want to work somewhere else, I'll give you the best recommendation you've ever seen. If you want to stay with us, there's a clear path to leadership positions. Tyler looked skeptical. Companies don't usually train people just to let them leave. Most companies think about employees as assets to be controlled. I'm starting to think about them as people to be empowered. You taught me that yesterday. For the first time since Daniel had arrived, Tyler smiled slightly. You really think this could work? I think we could build something amazing together. Something that actually makes the world better instead of just making rich people richer. Tyler was quiet for another long moment. Can I think about it? Of course. Take all the time you need. But Tyler? Daniel pulled out a business card and wrote something on the back. This is my personal number. If you need anything while you're deciding, food, a place to stay, call me. No strings attached. Tyler took the card and studied it. Daniel Rivera, CEO, Rivera Technologies. He looked up. You're not just some tech guy. You're the tech guy. I've heard of your company. Daniel nodded. I should have been more honest yesterday. But I wanted you to judge me based on how I acted, not how much money I have. $3 billion, Tyler said slowly. I looked you up last night after I got back to the shelter. You're worth $3 billion. Does that change things? Tyler considered this. It makes the offer more real. You actually have the resources to do what you're saying. But it also makes me wonder why you care about some random homeless kid. Because that random homeless kid taught me more about engineering, problem solving, and human decency in one afternoon than I've learned in years of board meetings and business conferences. Tyler stood up and gathered his few belongings. I need to think about this. It's a big decision. I understand. But Tyler, don't think too long. The world needs people like you working on these problems. And honestly, I need people like you to keep me focused on what really matters. As Tyler walked away, Daniel remained seated at the computer terminal. He realized he was more nervous about Tyler's answer than he'd been about any business deal in his career. This felt bigger than money or contracts or corporate success. This felt like a chance to actually make a difference. And for the first time in years, Daniel Rivera felt like he was doing something that mattered more than his net worth. 6 months later, Daniel stood in the lobby of Rivera Technologies watching Tyler present his first major project to the board of directors. The teenager, now 18 and wearing a crisp, button-down shirt that actually fit, was explaining his design for a low-cost electric vehicle charging system that could be installed in low-income neighborhoods. The key insight, Tyler was saying, pointing to his presentation slides, is that we've been thinking about charging infrastructure backwards. Instead of building expensive fast charging stations in wealthy areas, we should focus on slower, cheaper systems where people actually live and work. One of the board members, an older man who'd initially been skeptical about hiring Tyler, raised his hand. But slower charging means less convenience, Tyler nodded. For people who can afford to buy new cars whenever they want, yes. But for someone buying a used electric vehicle, convenience isn't the main concern. Affordability is. If we can charge a car overnight for $2 instead of fast charging for $20, we make electric vehicles accessible to millions more people. Daniel watched the board members' faces. 6 months ago, they'd been politely resistant to his decision to hire Tyler. Today, they were taking notes and asking detailed technical questions about a project that could revolutionize transportation for working-class families. After the presentation, Daniel found Tyler in the engineering lab, still riding the high of his successful pitch. That was incredible, Daniel said. The board was genuinely impressed. Johnson called it the most innovative thinking he'd seen in years. Tyler grinned. Johnson's the guy who called me a diversity hire on my first day, right? That's the one. He also just approved a $10 million budget for your charging project. Tyler's eyes widened.
10 million?
For my idea? Your idea could change everything, Tyler. Making electric vehicles affordable for everyone? That's not just good business. That's transformational technology. They walked through the lab together, past engineers working on battery designs, charging algorithms, and power management systems. Many of them were now incorporating ideas that Tyler had suggested, practical solutions born from understanding what it meant to live without resources. You know what's weird? Tyler said as they reached his workstation. 6 months ago, I was sleeping in shelters and trying to finish high school on library computers. Now I'm running engineering projects and taking college classes and actually thinking about the future, instead of just surviving day to day. How does it feel? Tyler thought for a moment. Overwhelming sometimes. Like I'm living someone else's life. But also right, like this is what I was supposed to be doing all along. Daniel understood exactly what Tyler meant. His own life had changed dramatically in the past 6 months, too. Not the externals. He still lived in the same penthouse, still ran the same company, still had more money than he could spend in 10 lifetimes. But everything else was different. I have something to show you, Daniel said, leading Tyler toward the conference room. The preliminary numbers from our youth program. 6 months ago, Daniel had asked Tyler to help design a program for homeless and foster youth interested in technology careers. What started as an idea had grown into something much larger. Tyler looked at the presentation on the conference room screen. 47 participants in the first cohort. 47 kids who were in situations similar to yours. We're providing housing, education, and apprenticeships across multiple companies now, not just ours. And the completion rate? 96%. Almost everyone who started the program is still in it. Compare that to traditional foster care outcomes. Tyler stared at the numbers. This is working. It's actually working. It's working because you helped design it. You understood what these kids needed because you'd been there yourself. Daniel clicked to the next slide. But this is the number I'm most proud of. Tyler read the slide aloud. Total program cost per participant, $43,000. Average starting salary after completion, $68,000. He looked up at Daniel. You're turning a profit on helping people. Sustainable social programs have to make economic sense or they don't survive. You taught me that too. Tyler walked to the window, looking out at the city where he'd been homeless just 6 months earlier. You know what the best part is? It's not just about individual success stories. We're actually changing systems. Daniel joined him at the window. How do you mean? Before, companies hired people like me as exceptions. Feel-good stories about overcoming adversity. But we're proving that people from disadvantaged backgrounds bring valuable perspectives to technical work. We're not just charity cases. We're good business, Daniel nodded. That had been one of the biggest surprises of the past 6 months. The youth program participants weren't just succeeding. They were outperforming traditional hires in several key areas. They worked harder, showed more creativity in problem-solving, and understood real-world applications in ways that privileged engineers often missed. I got a call yesterday, Tyler said. From Tesla. They want to implement a version of our charging system nationwide. Tyler, that's incredible. What did you tell them? I told them I'd think about it. But honestly, I think we should do it ourselves. Start our own company focused specifically on accessible electric vehicle technology. Daniel felt a familiar thrill, the same feeling he'd had when starting his first company. But this time it wasn't about personal wealth or proving himself. This time it felt like building something that actually mattered. Are you serious about that? Daniel asked. Dead serious. I've been thinking about it for weeks. We have the technology, we understand the market, and we know how to build teams of people who actually understand the problems we're trying to solve. Daniel looked at Tyler, 18 years old, brilliant and thinking about starting a company that could change millions of lives. 6 months ago, this kid had been sleeping in shelters. Now he was proposing to revolutionize an industry. What would you need from me? Daniel asked. Investment, obviously, but also mentorship. I know technology and engineering, but I don't know business yet. I'd need someone who's built companies before. And you trust me enough to be your business partner? Tyler smiled. You kept every promise you made. You gave me opportunities without trying to control what I did with them. And you listened when I told you that your wealth came with responsibilities. Tyler paused. Plus, I've seen how you've changed over the past 6 months. How have I changed? You used to talk about success in terms of personal achievement. Money, recognition, beating competitors. Now you talk about impact. How many people we can help. How many systems we can improve. It's like you finally figured out what wealth is actually for. Daniel felt something he rarely experienced. Genuine pride that had nothing to do with financial achievement. You know what's funny? I thought I was helping you, but you've taught me more than I've taught you. That's how real partnerships work, right? Both people grow. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, looking out at the city that had brought them together. Daniel thought about that day 6 months ago when his car broke down on Grove Street. At the time, it had felt like a disaster. Now it felt like the most important breakdown of his life. So, Daniel said finally, should we start planning this new company? Tyler's grin was brighter than any profit margin Daniel had ever seen. Let's change the world. As they walked back toward the engineering lab to start sketching out business plans, Daniel realized something profound. For the first time in his adult life, he understood the difference between being wealthy and being rich. Wealth was numbers in bank accounts. But richness, real richness, was having the opportunity to build something meaningful with people you respected. And by that measure, Daniel Rivera had never been richer than he was right now. Planning a company with a brilliant 18-year-old who taught him that the most valuable currency in the world wasn't money. It was purpose.